The haunted house. This story has been spreading everywhere. Everyone has their own style to tell about the house. This would help people stay more alert when choosing a place to buy, because you might be scammed to buy a haunted house. That was a medium house that was abandoned for years. There were rumors that people said the dead owners were still living there. After so many changes, the population had been growing. We were all facing difficult economic circumstances, and people needed accommodation. Still, no one would have a gut to come close to that house. They said that was the haunted house. The house was for sale for years, but no one in the neighborhood had asked about it. One day, a couple paid a visit. That was William's family. Mr. William just had a promotion and was referred to another company's location. His family needed a house to settle down at the new site. The realtor was Oliver. If he could sell the house, he could make huge money. I think this house is really a good choice for your 4 members family. Oliver took them to pay a visit to the house and lavished in his compliment to the house. Mr. William looked around the house and turned to his wife Emily. "This location is very convenient, honey." Once he gazed to the roof, Mr. William hesitated. This house looked damaged. There has been no one using the house in such a long time, so it had been degraded. But come to think of the position, it was very convenient for him to go to the office. It was also nearby the market and school. Everything was perfectly suitable to him. Looked at the rubble, he didn't want to buy it. Oliver was a professional realtor. It would be great if there is someone could buy that house. He made his move. "Director William, no worries. If you decide to buy this house, we'll call the agency to repair this house real quick. We guarantee it will be like new when you move in. Our company will cover your repairing fees," he promised. Then he continued to induce Mr. William, "Director William, how you could find another house like this, spacious and great location with an excellent price. You don't have to make a decision right now, you could consider it." Since the realtor offered to repair the house, he didn't feel reluctant to make the decision. He turned to his wife, Emily. "What do you think? It's your choice, honey." After finishing the paperwork, Oliver started repairing the housework as promised. He instantly found a crew to renovate it. He came by every day to check the progress. "Hey, make it carefully. Director William is waiting to move in." One of the crew workers brought out some stuff and asked James. There was some old stuff in the storage. What could we do with them? Actually, that was not Oliver's job to follow the crew to renovate the house. Still, he wanted to be in charge of taking advantage of selling old furniture or in materials fees. The worker brought out the old stuff he had found from the storage. That was from the former owner. Probably, there were some old furniture and the family's photo. Those weren't valuable, so Oliver just ignored them. If you like something, you could take it or else just toss them away. After a half-month of renovation, the house had been improved vastly so that William's family could move in. The day his family came, people around had been both surprised, scared, and curious. They had discussed that, who dares to move in that house? Such a brave man? He is not afraid of death? William's family had to wait for days to be there, so they were so much excited. Looked at the new house. It was much better than his first seeing. Mr. William smiled happily and talked to his wife. "James had a good work. The house looked spacious and beautiful, isn't it?" Emily nodded her head and laid on his shoulder. "As long as I could live with you and our children, I'm always happy." They were unable to imagine there was a threat that would come. It happened the first night they slept in their new home. It was midnight. They were tossing and turning. "Honey, I feel cold? Do you feel so?" "Yeah, how cold?" They felt cold and shivering, even they were covered with a blanket. It was in October, the weather must have been mild. That was a bit weird. Emily worried about their children. She got up, took her coat, and tended to come by to check them out. I need to check out our children if they're covering with a blanket, or else they could catch flu. Right after stepped into her children's room, she heard Emma's voice, the youngest. She was talking to someone. You have been lived here before? As usual, their two kids must have been asleep but looked like they were too overexcited due to the move to sleep. She pushed the door. She saw her son Jack was sleeping while her daughter was sitting, facing the wall and talking to someone at the corner. There was no one there. She was unable to understand who was talking to her daughter. Her kid continued, "But this is our home, why I have to leave?" Emily came closer and asked her daughter, "Emma, who are you talking to, honey?" Emma pointed to the corner. "Mommy, that is Amelia. He said he wouldn't allow us to live here and would make us leave soon." Emily was unfathomable ultimately. She thought that must have been children's stuff. "All right, honey, lay down and go to sleep. We're gonna play more tomorrow, okay?" While Emily covered her daughter with a blanket, she suddenly heard a door sound like someone opened the door. She startled. "That's Amelia, Mommy, he just left." Emily was getting a bit worried and doubtful. She appeased her baby and left the room. She closed the door. Emily was a bit scared. The main door was opened as well. She had closed it already earlier. Not her husband, came outside. She looked out the yard. The storage door was also opening. Emily didn't want to bother her husband while he was sleeping, so she decided to come out to see what happened in the storage. Many things in the storage were clearly arranged. At her first look, that was just fine. She was relatively content for the realtor and the workers earlier. Emily stepped into the storage step by step and looked around carefully. She sensed someone was eyeing her every step. She didn't turn around yet. Once she decided to leave the storage since there was nothing wrong, a moving sound was at the top of the old cabinet nearby. She eyed up. There was a big box at the top that must have been a toolbox which was containing hammers and handsaws. It suddenly felt off to her head. Emily was unable to dodge it. The box felt of opening. Everything in it flew out along as well, and the hammer felt straight to her head. Emily's head was hit by the hammer badly. It hurt her so badly. She fell to the ground after gave an exclamation. Her eyes catching where the box felt out, up the top of the cabinet. She saw a boy. He was squatting in it. The boy smirked at her, and she lost her consciousness. On the other hand, Mr. William had waited for his wife to come back from their children's room for so long. He rushed out and heard some broken sounds in the storage. Seeing his wife felt, he ran towards her. "Emily, are you okay?" Mr. William carried his wife and tended to bring her to the hospital. Blood was all over her face, which was so dangerous, but his wife kept talking something, "Ghost, ghost," painfully. After hospitalizing, after a few checks, luckily, she just got some slight shocks. There was nothing critical. Mr. William asked after what happened that night. Emily told him the whole thing. The reason why she came to the storage, then saw a baby at the top of the cabinet in there, and he pushed the toolbox out. That was Amelia. "He has been live here before," their little girl spoke up. At first, Mr. William didn't believe those stuff, but hearing his wife and daughter seriously, he started to doubt the house. He had been at the hospital with his wife for a while, then he came home alone. He found a ladder and climbed up to check the cabinet. At first glance, he found it surprised. It was full of dusty, and there were clearly some fingerprints and footprints there. Those prints looked new. That probably has been a ghost there. He tried to push the toolbox to his wife. He wondered. The more Mr. William thought, the more he got scared out. He could not let his family live there anymore. That was so dangerous, so he sent his kids to one of his co-workers. Then he came to the police station. Mr. William had known the sheriff who had been living and working there for years. He came by to ask about the house. Once the sheriff heard he wandered about the place, he looked shocked and scared. "Why you don't tell me you bought that house?" "Jesus. I just bought. No time to give you a call." The sheriff is Mr. Samuel. He very surprised since his friend bought that haunted house. There were 2 families used to live in that house and they had got dead people. You didn't know that? What? 2 families? There were dead people? What happened? Sheriff Samuel told him about the old day. He had been assigned to 2 cases related to that house. The 2 instances had happened a very long time ago. Samuel thought there would be no one who could move into the house. The 2 cases were very impressive to him since they were all too cruel and heartbroken. The gap time between the first and the other case was a few years, but the details were very similar. The point was the husband had killed himself after killed his wife and child. The reason had been still opening. The crime scene was very drastic. The killer had used the knife to chop out the bodies to pieces. After investigation, at first, it was all pleased families. Still, after moving to that house, the husband's temper changed a lot, and in the end, he killed his wife and son and committed suicide. After then, even the reasons were all family conflicts, but the neighborhood had rumored that the house had been haunted, and unexpectedly, William had bought the house after years of empty. After hearing Oliver's whole thing, Mr. William got more panicked, but he was pleased that it was still soon when he could find this out. "William, listen to me. You gotta move out right now. I'll help you to find another good house. Who knows what could happen next?" The sheriff didn't directly lead him to the conclusion about the haunted house. Still, as a friend, he advised William to move out as quickly as possible or else he would regret it. Mr. William also panicked. Then he obeyed his friend. He immediately found another house and moved. Staying in that house, I don't know what else happened. He was too negligent to not research carefully before buying that house. Luckily everything was discovered early, and his family was safe. As for the haunted house, you just leave it there without selling it. Later, a project was built, and Mr. William earned a large amount of money in compensation for site clearance. And William also heard that the area was not very peaceful.